us today for our third-party risk management and the hidden factors of success webinar. My name is Jessie Redmond, and I will be your host. On your screen, you should see multiple widgets that you can use, including Ask Question, Media Player, Slides, Related Content, Speaker Bio, Request Demo, and Help. If you're unfamiliar with our webinars, all the widget boxes are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to maximize your screen space. At the bottom of your screen in the toolbar are icon buttons you can use to show and hide the widgets. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner of the widget. If you experience any issues or have technical questions, you can use the Help widget or submit them along with any other questions through the Ask Question widget. Don't worry, we do capture all questions throughout the session. We will be answering some during the webcast, but those that we do not have a chance to answer live, we will address with you via email. Today's live session is eligible for 1 CPE credit. If you wish to receive this credit, please remember to answer all of the polling questions that will appear on your screen during today's presentation. You will also be sent a follow-up survey link 24 hours after the live session that will need to be completed in order to receive the CPE credit. With us today, we have Hillary Dewhurst, Venminder's Head of Third-Party Risk Education and Advocacy. She will explore some of the trickier aspects of third-party risk management and offer practical strategies and advice for improving your program and enhancing your professional skills. You will see a link to a copy of today's slide deck, a link to our website, a link to our samples library, links to our How to Engage, Educate, and Enable Your Vendor Managers ebook, our Who is Responsible for Third-Party Risk Management Toolkit, our Setting Expectations with Prospective Third Parties, a Playbook for Third-Party Vendor Managers ebook, as well as a link to our library of additional resources, all within the Related Content widget. With all that being said, I would like to hand it over to Hillary. Hillary, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are going to cover a lot of material today as we discuss those hidden success factors for third-party risk management. And we're going to start off with a discussion about a risk culture, what they are, how to navigate them. And we're going to move into fostering trust and collaborations, which dovetails into managing difficult stakeholders and enabling the business. And then we're going to wrap up with some characteristics of excellent third-party risk management professionals and organizations. So let's jump right in. So I'm really excited about our webinar today because it's totally different than the type of materials we commonly present, but we've built this content from many questions we've gotten through webinars, our third-party think tank, and I've based a lot of it on my own experiences as a third-party risk management professional for over 25 years. Now, the truth is that you can have a really great framework, you can have an excellent policy, but something may not be working exactly as you'd like it to. Maybe you're getting a lot of resistance from the line of business. You know, something is not quite right. Well, hopefully today's webinar will help you identify some areas maybe that need improvement or give you some considerations for things you really haven't thought about much before. In any case, I hope this information is really helpful today and helps you succeed in your third-party risk management programs. Now to jump right in, let's talk about your organization's risk culture. So what do we mean by that exactly? So risk culture is a term that refers to all the norms, attitudes, and behaviors related to managing and controlling risk. The risk culture of an organization is reflected in the decisions that management makes, the attitudes that people have about risk management in general, and also the strategies to identify, manage, and monitor risk. Organizations with very strong risk cultures tend to be very proactive and how they treat risk, while those with weaker or less mature cultures tend to be more reactive. So let's explore this a bit further. So there's basically 4 key components that make up a risk culture. The first one is the tone from the top. It's what management and the board both say and do to emphasize the importance of managing risk within the organization. This can be translated in integrating risk management into business decisions and strategies, as well as the type of resources that are dedicated to it. There's accountability. This is where everybody understands their role and is held accountable for the expectations around them managing risk that's appropriate to their role. There's credible or effective challenge, and this is really a process that is usually found within very open and transparent organizations that allows employees, the board, management, whoever, to challenge any process, strategy, or task that may not be in the best interest, maybe because it's inefficient, it's ineffective, or it's possibly illegal or something else. We, of course, don't allow this to happen just because, but it's usually based on credible evidence, data, or facts. And then we have the governance system, which is all of the systems of direction and control that determine how decisions are made, who's accountable, how control is exercised, and how behavior is governed from the top down through the organization. This could be your reporting structures, your policies, your procedures, codes of conduct, and oversight processes.
So it's really important to understand that most risk cultures are going to fall somewhere along a spectrum. So on one hand, you might have organizations that are less mature, they're less focused in their risk management, and they're taking big risks just because they haven't learned or focused on identifying and managing those risks. On the other side of the spectrum, we have more controlled environments, more mature environments that seek to identify and control risks to prevent, unwanted events from happening. You can think of the spectrum as levels of maturity, where when in less mature organizations, risk-taking is not deliberate, it's just a byproduct of not having good risk management. Whereas on the other side, in a more mature organization, risks are identified and evaluated to see if they're going to provide the right benefit. The bottom line here is that risk is always a natural part of doing business. You can't avoid ever taking any risk. But when risk goes unidentified and unmanaged, the benefits of taking that risk are almost always neutralized when something goes wrong. So I'm not going to walk you through this entire chart today because you do have access to the deck, but just to point out some different hallmarks of where your organization might be on the spectrum. It might be more proactive for some things and more reactive for others. But in general, let's say, for example, in a proactive risk culture, that tone from the top is really strong. There's great messaging around risk management, accountability, and ensuring that appropriate resources are available to identify, assess, manage, and monitor risk. In contrast, in a reactive environment, the board is not involved or informed at all, and the company's risk appetite is poorly formed, maybe it's not clear, and as a result, there's not a lot of resources aligned against risk management, or if there are, they're not consistently allocated. Now, there's a lot of examples on here, but the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is it's really important to be able to identify what type of risk culture you're working with, especially when you've been tasked with third-party risk management. So let's assume that maybe you're a third-party risk management program director or team member, and it feels like things are a little unbalanced from a risk management perspective at your organization, and you can't quite figure out why, but something seems a little off. Now, honestly, there's a lot of people who never even think about it. They just join an organization. They're there to help support third-party risk management, and then it seems like there's a lot of floundering and resistance. So whether you're going to join a new organization, you're struggling a little bit in your current one, just take a step back and think about your organization's risk culture. It may be that your expectations are not matched to that reality of the risk culture. Now, that's not to say you should accept terrible processes or bad risk management, because you shouldn't. But to really make a positive impact, you need to start where you are and work from there. The reason for this is that it can be really helpful for you and your team to determine where you need to put your focus and spend your time. So if you're in a very corrective or reactive environment, it's not going to be the best use of your time to work on a lot of process improvements until you can be sure that you've established some trust and credibility and you have a good basic framework. You also need to spend a lot of time educating the stakeholders on their requirements and implementing those guidelines. You should also probably make a significant effort to identify allies and champions for the program, because these are the things that are going to be the best use of your time in that type of risk culture. If your organization has a proactive or preemptive risk culture, it's advisable to prioritize process improvements and enhanced reporting through tools like predictive analytics. Embracing a more proactive risk culture means integrating risk disciplines for a cohesive, enterprise-wide view of risk management. So, if you haven't really taken the time to think about the risk culture that you're working in, I would advise you to take some inventory of how those 4 risk culture components stack up. Because if you're swimming against the tide, meaning that you're trying to implement very prescriptive requirements in an organization that doesn't even understand why third-party risk management is necessary, you might be wasting your time. And if you find yourself in an organization where there's a lot of risk management maturity, there's a lot of proactive and preemptive risk management culture, then you're going to have to significantly contribute to those efforts with meaningful tools and processes that enhance the risk culture. So regardless of your risk culture, it's really important for third-party risk management professionals and teams to foster trust and collaboration. And a lot of you may be thinking, of course that's important, but trust me, you cannot believe how many really talented third-party risk management professionals are derailed because they operate in a vacuum. They may be entirely correct in their efforts, but if they lack credibility or folks don't know them and trust them, it's going to be very hard to get a seat at the table or have a voice in important conversations. So even if you know third-party risk management like the back of your hand, I would say you also need to know your stakeholders and engage them by asking the right questions and asking for feedback or suggestions for improvement. Knowing your stakeholders will also provide you with important information when it comes to knowing who the potential derailers are and what their motivations are. Another way to foster trust is to make sure that you promote accountability. That means when someone is responsible for turning in a third-party risk management deliverable, they're given a deadline and held to it just like everyone else. This means that we apply the rules and requirements consistently and without judgment or favoritism. It's not uncommon for third-party risk management team members to maybe let one vendor owner slide because they like them, but will not hesitate to escalate a late deliverable for someone else. I mean, come on. It's human nature. We all work with a lot of people, and it's natural to like some better than others. But when you're in charge of a process that has risk management in the name, you have to make sure you're consistent when you apply the rules. Finally, one of the best ways you can foster trust and collaboration is to recognize and appreciate those folks that are out there doing a good job, helping you out along the way, even that just means delivering their stuff on time. You know, be generous with praise and stingy with criticism, as they say. But if you do have to give feedback, make sure it's constructive because, you know, training and education can go a long way. All right, so let's say you've been trying to work through the limitations of your risk culture and you've tried to reach out, foster trust and collaboration, but you're still seeing a lot of resistance or some just downright difficult behavior. And that is because there absolutely is such a thing as a difficult stakeholder. And we know a lot of times these folks are hiding out in the line of business, and that could be the management or the actual vendor owners themselves. You know, I've encountered this many times in my career, and there have been so many times when I just thought to myself, why can't these people just follow the rules? Why can't they just do what they're told? And I bet some of you out there have felt that way also. But, you know, when you're in that situation, one of the best things you can do is to really think about that root cause of that resistance. So here's some very common root causes. One, there's an insufficient understanding of third-party risk management. Training and education are insufficient or maybe absent. The processes, procedures we're using to get things done are just very clunky or ineffective. Maybe we don't have a lot of that good tone from the top. You know, that vendor owner may be really struggling with bandwidth to get these things done. And that's because a lot of them don't think it's part of their real job, okay? And most importantly, because there's not a clear connection between how effective third-party risk management helps the organization succeed, the project succeed, or even the individual succeed. So while you think about some of those root causes, I think we're ready for our first poll. Jessie?
And this brings us to the first poll question of the day. You should see the poll question now in the slides area. If you have any issues, please feel free to send us a message using the Ask Question widget, and we will be happy to assist. As a reminder, if you wish to receive the CPE credit for today's session, you must answer all poll questions and be in attendance for the entire live session. This poll question is, the risk culture of my organization supports and champions third-party risk management principles, practices, and the program, supports risk management overall that needs improvement when it comes to third-party risk management, is underdeveloped or unclear, none of the above, or unsure. Hillary, we have some time now to answer one of the questions from the audience.
Okay.
That question is, who is responsible for a company's risk culture, the board or management?
Ooh, that is a really good question. So let's just break it down a little bit and think about, that board is really setting that risk appetite and direction for the company, right? They're helping us understand what types of risk and amounts of risk are acceptable and under which circumstances and who gets to approve those risks. But when it really comes to that risk culture and all of the norms and behaviors that are happening within the organization, that's really about management. So, for example, if you have a policy in place that isn't really enforced, that's really about the management. It's not so much about the board. Now, the board's ultimately responsible, but that day-to-day sort of building the attitudes and the norms and the expectations really falls with your organizational management. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, everyone, for answering that poll question. Here are those results. By the way, you may have noticed reactions such as a thumbs up or heart coming across the screen. If you find this feature distracting, you can turn it off by clicking the 4 arrows in the top right-hand corner of the slides widget, which will expand the slides area to full screen and no longer show the reactions. Also, before we move on in the related content widget, you'll find a helpful resource to reference. It's our Setting Expectations with Prospective Third Parties, a playbook for third-party vendor managers ebook. With that, Hillary, back to you.
Now, I do not want to demonize vendor owners because just like most of us, they're just people trying to get their job done. So let's take a minute and use a little example to understand their point of view. So this is our fictional vendor owner. She's Tony. She's just accepted this new position as a product manager for a new organization. And the job description did list vendor management as one of her responsibilities. And so, she's done some vendor management in her previous roles, and she thinks, hey, great. That means I'm going to work with the vendor who's providing the products and services, supporting my product, and I'm going to read some reports and do some quality testing. Just like I did in my last job, I've got this. All right, but now Tony gets to her new role, and she soon realizes that she's accountable for multiple vendors and their respective third-party risk management tasks, which happen to be a lot more substantial than they were in her last position. And they now include risk assessments, pursuing due diligence documentation, negotiating contracts, overseeing formal performance management, and more. So what is Tony thinking now? Well, here are a few thoughts that crossed her mind. So first of all, nobody brought this up in my interviews, and I don't even know how to complete these activities. My real job seems pretty busy, and I don't even know if I'm going to have time to do this. And third-party risk management isn't even on my performance plan, and to my knowledge, my bonus is only based on my product work. I've been here for a couple of meetings with my manager, and they've never said anything about third-party risk management. Okay, so believe it or not, this is not an uncommon experience for a lot of vendor owners. They join a new organization or get a new position, and all of a sudden they're caught unaware, and challenged with tasks that are unfamiliar, a workload that's unexpected, and this can naturally result in frustration and resistance. In my last role, I had a vendor owner told me that he thought it was all a little bait and switch, which was not my fault, but as the director of the third-party risk management program, I bore the brunt of it all the same. All right, so we've talked a little about those vendor owner perspective. Let's talk about another situation where we need to identify some root causes. We're going to start with a pretty common situation. So this is Alan. He is the third-party risk management program manager at his organization, and he's having a really difficult time getting the vendor owners to follow the third-party risk management processes. So he thinks, these vendor owners, they don't even care about vendor risk management. They don't follow the processes. They always complain about extra work, and they just don't understand why we have to do all this just to onboard a vendor. We've all been there at some point, right? Now, of course, this is really wearing him down, and like most of us, he doesn't have enough resources to get all of his work done, and now the first line isn't doing theirs, and he's spending a lot of time following up and sending reminders, most recently dealing with a very confrontational first line vendor owner. So he's kind of at the end of his patience, and he decides it's time to engage the business line manager to drive enforcement to the policy. Well, that conversation didn't really go the way Alan wanted it to. The business line manager said, hey, I hear you, but before we can enforce the policy, I need to know why these folks aren't following the processes. I need to know the root causes. So let's look at how to distill some of these root causes and what to do about it.
So what do we mean by looking at root causes? How do we take the information that's presented to us and really tease out that root cause? So here's an example. When the manager went in to talk to the employees about why they weren't complying with third-party risk management expectations, they provided some specific feedback and rationale. So the first one is, it seems like overkill. Why do we even have to do this? Well, the root cause of that rationale is because they clearly don't understand the importance of managing risk, right? In the next example, someone says, I don't really know how to do it. It's too confusing. Well, the root cause here might be that there's just not good training and education available for those vendor owners to do their job. Another big one, and we hear this a lot, is I have other priorities. It's not my job. It's not my real job. Well, one of the biggest issues there is that the importance of doing third-party risk management, any emphasis on how it interacts within their actual job responsibilities, is not really being messaged well by leadership. So when we start really looking at root causes, it enables us to be able to identify possible actions and strategies that can deliver a better outcome. So the first two here are fairly self-explanatory. When we don't understand what it is we need to do, or we don't understand why we do something, we can really shore that up with better training, education, and messaging, right? But the last one here is something I want to focus on, and that is leadership messaging and enforcement. Getting that tone from the top is not easy if it doesn't already exist. After all, you can't really control what your executives or managers are doing or saying. But there are some techniques you can use to help emphasize the need for that messaging. And one of those would be to have a good program document. So your program is a document that basically explains the requirements for third-party risk management, the processes you use to accomplish those requirements, and who is accountable. It also would talk about the inputs and outputs and, other factors that go into the whole process. Sometimes when people are able to see this end-to-end, it makes a lot more sense, and it makes it a lot easier to message back out to the organization. Another thing you can do is have a quarterly check-in with those lines of business. Make sure the managers understand what is expected from the vendor owners on their team, approximately how much work effort this is going to be, and support that with metrics and reporting. So you want to tell them exactly what is not happening on time, or how late something is, or how their line of business compares to another in the organization. These are 3 ways that you can improve the likelihood that you will get more support and better messaging and enforcement.
So understanding the other person's point of view and really understanding their challenges can be helpful in navigating difficult situations. But it often takes more than just empathetic understanding, because at the end of the day, things still have to get done. So keep in mind that even in a less mature risk culture, you're still responsible for third-party risk management, whether that's, implementing the framework, or you're on the team to support, the program. You still have to get a job done. So if you're getting a lot of resistance and pushback, one of my best pieces of advice is don't defend your position, but rather ask that problematic stakeholder for collaboration and problem solving. This is going to do one of 2 things. It's either going to help them get educated so you can work well together and find a better solution, or they will realize they don't actually want to be part of the solution, and they'll generally turn their attention elsewhere. It's important to always focus on the problem and not the person, because eventually you can solve a problem, but you can't necessarily change a person. Now, I wish there was some magic bullet that would work on every difficult stakeholder in every situation, but there just isn't. And sometimes the best way to get through situations like this is to check in with your own perspectives to see if there's room for change. So if you're still struggling, it's time to think about maybe your own mindset. One of the first things we can do is not take it personally. I know this is tough, but remember, you didn't invent third-party risk management. You're essentially the messenger, so don't shoot the messenger, right? But you always do need to think about how you're approaching the situation. So I know personally I've struggled sometimes with an us versus them thinking. So third-party risk management versus the line of business, when I should have been thinking about the we as an organization. Another suggestion I like to make is move away from rules or rules thinking and move to rules or tools thinking. So the rules give us absolute boundaries, but we do have the ability to be creative problem solvers and stay within those boundaries. So instead of saying something like, oh, we have to do this because the regulators say so, think about, are there any alternatives we can use and still meet the requirements? I guarantee your stakeholders will react more positively when you're looking for solutions versus just enforcing the rules. Personally, I know I have said the words, I'm so sick of babysitting that person, why can't they get it done? The thing is, just forget being a babysitter or cop or an enforcer. When someone is not delivering, for example, you have a vendor owner who's really struggling with performance management, is always late, then delivers subpar performance reviews. Put on your coach, your consultant, or your mentor hat instead. Instead of approaching the person saying, you're late again, try something else like, hey, I want to make sure you understand why this is important, or what do you need to help you successfully complete this requirement on time? Where do you feel like you're struggling? Always think about your business line and their owners as your customers, because this is ultimately what they are. Third-party risk management takes a lot of time and effort, but with the right collaboration and attitude, you can think about the team win versus how you're going to force difficult lines of business or vendor owners to simply just comply with all the requirements. So moving away from a mindset of enforcing the rules to one that is enabling the business while still meeting requirements is a great strategy for improving difficult stakeholder relationships. And the process that we're going to keep in mind in your capacity as a third-party risk management professional or program owner is that your job is to ensure a framework and tools that make third-party risk management possible. All of your processes and tools are essentially products and services for those vendor owners and lines of business, and they need them to run their business safely. The most effective third-party risk management teams enforce the rules, but they're also active consultants and mentors for those individuals and teams charged with third-party risk management. Because we've all had the situation where we have a vendor that needs to be onboarded right away, right? And the request is coming out of nowhere. There's no heads up. And of course, they need to be under contract within some really ridiculously short period of time to realize some discount or for some other reason. Yes, this can be frustrating, especially when you're already facing a backlog of due diligence reviews or something similar. However, it's always good to remember that your organization needs to bring that vendor on to solve a problem or realize an opportunity. You and your third-party risk management capacity can be instrumental in helping the organization achieve those goals. It may mean rearranging the queue or figuring out how to prioritize the most important engagements. But let's think about how else you can enable the business. Let's look at some specific ways to do that. As I mentioned earlier, all of our third-party risk management tools and processes are essentially products and services that we deliver to our customers or the line of business. And they need these products and services so they can effectively manage third-party risk. So most importantly, we can't expect vendor owners to perform the work if they aren't given high-quality education about why third-party risk management matters and robust training on how to perform their duties. Another tool is a dedicated third-party risk management system, ideally one that stores all the necessary information in one place, is easy to use, and has comprehensive reporting. Vendor control assessments provided by qualified SMEs are an excellent way to help your lines of business confirm and validate that the vendor's controls are sufficient for managing the risk. Vendor risk alert and monitoring services, let's face it, monitoring a vendor can be really challenging sometimes, especially when internet news alerts are your only resource. If you can offer your vendor owners relevant, targeted, and timely alerts through a subscription service, it's going to make their job more efficient and the results are going to be better. And even with all these tools, your time and attention can make a world of difference for your vendor owners, especially when they're faced with complicated situations that they don't have the practical experience to manage. All right, let's talk about education and training for a moment. So when we think about our objectives for vendor owner education, it should really serve three purposes. The first one is to inform the vendor owner about the purpose and objectives of third-party risk management at our organization. So this is our why. The next is to identify all the tools and processes that are used to execute third-party risk management across the organization. So this is our what. And then the third is to provide practical instruction on how to accomplish those tasks. So that's the how. Now, one of the biggest issues that we see repeatedly is that organizations are really focusing on the second and third objective with no regard for the first. So hopefully this is a good illustration about the sort of progression of knowledge that we need and how to layer each level of knowledge and build on the one that came before it. So we always want to start with the why third-party risk management is necessary, how it protects the organization and its customers, and its relation to enterprise risk. Then we want to focus on that what. What is the framework, all the rules, tools, and processes that make third-party risk management possible, how we govern those processes, and the stakeholder roles and responsibilities. And then we need to finish off with that practical instruction on how to use these tools. We need to make sure they understand the expectations for quality, accuracy, and timeliness. We need to help them understand how we manage issues and exceptions. So we always need to consider our processes and procedures because inefficient processes are a deterrent to compliance and adoption. So if you're using manual processes, try and get away from them. They're nobody's friend. They're more error-prone and more time-consuming. Make sure you solicit feedback about any process challenges. Sit down and go through the process with the vendor owner. You may have some blind spots or they're seeing something or experiencing struggles that you're not aware of. Make sure you review any toll gates and approvals. A lot of us, our processes are kind of over-embedded with approvals and toll gates, which slow down the process and create bottlenecks. So review what you've got there. Remove those bottlenecks whenever possible and practical. And then finally, review your procedures to make sure that they address only one process at a time are stakeholder specific, and provide clear instructions, and they're easy to follow. And now I think it's time for another poll. Jessie?
Our second poll question of the day is, our organization offers comprehensive and formal third-party risk management training for vendor owners. Yes, somewhat, we're in the planning stages, no, or you're unsure. Hillary, I have another question here that I think we could go ahead and answer.
Let's do it.
Great. Do the regulators have specific expectations for how you train and educate third-party risk managers?
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, that is a really interesting question because most of the regulatory guidelines are prescriptive when it comes to things like due diligence or what should be in your contract or what sort of cybersecurity elements you should review. But when it comes to that training and educating, they're really kind of a little bit more vague. What they are really emphasizing is that you have skilled people in those positions. So it's really up to your organization to, one, determine, that there are skilled people. And if they don't have the prerequisite skills and knowledge, of course, you're going to have to supplement that with some formal education and training. But the good news is the regulators have not been so prescriptive that we have to meet a certain standard of training. We just know from a best practice perspective that it's really important. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Hillary. Please go ahead and submit your responses as we will be closing the poll in just about 20 seconds. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them in the Ask Question widget and we will be happy to assist. We will be closing in just about 10 seconds. Thank you. Thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to answer the poll. Here are those results. I would like to quickly direct your attention back to the related content widget, where you will find our Who is Responsible for Third-Party Risk Management Toolkit. This handy toolkit is equipped with an ebook, sample organizational charts, and an organizational chart template. Okay, Hillary, let's continue with the presentation.
All right, to further enable the business, one thing we can do is really spotlight vendor ownership roles and responsibilities. One way we can do this is to contribute to the job description. So that means sitting down with human resources and recruiting to ensure that standardized descriptions of vendor management responsibilities are available, right? And we want to make sure that they include those descriptions in any role that's going to have vendor owner responsibilities. Okay, we can also volunteer to interview candidates that are going to be vendor owners. Now, we cannot do this for everybody in the organization, that's clear, but it might be helpful, especially for those candidates who will have responsibility for critical or high-risk vendors, to just be on the interview panel so that you can provide information to the hiring manager about what gaps might need to be filled when that person's hired. Are they a good fit? Do they have some knowledge gaps? And you can create a strategy on how to get the right candidate up to speed. We also want to collaborate with human resources to develop specific key performance indicators for employee performance plans for those folks that have responsibility for third-party risk management. Now, the reason we do this is because a lot of our vendor owners, almost all of them, have other roles and responsibilities, and they're expected to do this vendor management on the side. But we need to make sure they're held accountable and recognized for the third-party risk management work they do. So let's take a look at how this works. So in this example, we have two vendor owners. We have Jake and Rob. They're both product managers, okay? And Jake, in his performance, was totally focused on the product work, and from that perspective, he did an excellent job. However, his third-party risk management work was left undone, and that's created some negative impacts for other stakeholders, and we got an audit finding because of it. On the other hand, we have Rob, who's also an excellent product manager. He exceeded his expectations related to his product work, but he also met all the expectations related to his third-party risk management work and identified and remediated poor vendor performance. So when we look at these two folks together, who's really the better employee? Who should get a raise or a bonus? But if they're never held accountable for their third-party risk management responsibilities, they're probably not going to be priorities. So every vendor owner should have at least one KPI or performance goal relative to their third-party risk management work on their performance plans. All right, we can act as advocates for vendor owners because advocacy works both ways, right? So we can help out by meeting with our line of business leadership to really help enforce what the requirements and expectations are, help them really understand the scope and amount of work that we're expecting from these vendor owners. And then, don't forget to formally recognize vendor owners in front of their leadership for the work that is well done. I guarantee you this is something we don't do enough, and it makes a world of difference. So let's switch gears here a little bit and move to the discussion about what makes a great third-party risk management professional. How do we succeed in this role? Now, the first thing to understand is that you need more than just basic business skills and third-party risk management experience to be really successful, because the job really involves so many different skills and attributes. I mean, we're facilitators, process designers, regulatory experts, teachers, relationship managers, etc. All right, for the sake of time, we can't go through all of these attributes, but I do want to point out a few of the skills and knowledge that third-party risk management professionals should have to be really successful. We do need good project management skills. We need to be great communicators and have good analytical mindsets. We should be able to really simplify complicated ideas and make them clear and understandable. Emotional and social intelligence are paramount if you are navigating a bunch of different stakeholders, levels of management, vendors, etc. You need to be very emotionally intelligent and socially aware. Excellent follow-through. We want someone who's detail-oriented and committed to continuous improvement, and that's also a proactive problem solver. These are like the foundational tenets of excellent third-party risk management professionals. But let's not forget, we need to understand the life cycle. We need to be able to identify and analyze third-party risks. We should know the regulations, have some practical experience managing third parties. That is always something I recommend. If you can hire someone who's actually managed a vendor, that could be a great foundation for success. And then understanding those stakeholder roles and responsibilities. Now, beyond our basic interview questions, which we all have, we want to think about some other conversations that we can have to tease out some really important information. So we want to understand if they have a good sense of the third-party risk management issues affecting your industry. We need to get a good insight onto the risk culture that they're coming from, right? It may be totally different, but we need to assess that so we know how to help them succeed when they get there. Do they have a rules mentality? Or are they creative problem solvers? Can they answer the question, who are your customers? And what might they use? What resources do they use to stay current in their role? These are just a few of the extra things that you can find out when interviewing to make sure you have the best fit. All right, so if you are looking for a third-party risk management role, maybe you're looking for a new opportunity, it's really important to find the right organization, not just the right job, because a lot of the attributes of that organization are going to either contribute to or deter you from being successful. So let's take a look at some of those elements you should be evaluating as a job seeker. So you'll want to definitely ask some questions about their risk culture, kind of understanding that tone from the top, how they hold people accountable, what the governance methods are. You also want to ask some questions to help you understand how mature the program is, like how long have they had a policy, how good is the organizational awareness, what kind of training and education do they offer for third-party owners, what are the penalties for noncompliance. You also want to think about resources, how many full-time people there are, do they have a dedicated system, are they using risk alert monitoring services, who are the subject matter experts, and do we have good access to them? We'll also want to think about where third-party risk management aligns within the organization, who that C-level owner is, and who the program champions are. And we also want to ask some questions about what's third-party risk management relationship to the stakeholders. Is it good? Could it use improvement? Is it neutral? And is third-party risk management included in the risk committee? And we also want to ask some questions about management priorities. So, are they really all about regulatory compliance, managing risks? Are they about, vendor performance and value? We want to get a good sense of this because even if you're going in and building a program from the ground up, it's a great thing to know what you're working with and what will be expected of you and some of the challenges you might have in that role. Now, we covered a lot of this on the previous slide, but just some questions to really go in and ask. Some things that we didn't cover already were, has the program had an audit or regulatory exam? What were the results? What are some of the current challenges executing third-party risk management effectively at the organization today? And if you're hired, what will you need to do in the first 90 days, 6 months, or even a year? Now, while you're thinking about that, it's time for our very last poll. Jessie?
This poll question is, at my organization, our top third-party risk management challenge is we don't have enough third-party risk management full-time employees. It's a manual process, lack of internal awareness and compliance, one or more of the above, none of the above, or you're not sure. Hillary, let's go ahead and answer another question from the audience.
I'm ready.
Great. This question is, would an organization without a risk committee be considered immature or reactive?
Not necessarily. Now, when it comes to organizations, there's all kinds of, structures. Organizations come in different sizes, and so some of those risk issues may be handled in a different format or within a different group. Generally speaking, it's not just the existence of a risk committee that makes an organization more mature, more proactive, but it's really that systematic identification, analysis of risk, and then making sure that issues are remediated, that risks are appropriately dealt with, and that they're in line with the risk appetite. Now, having said that, a lot of less mature organizations or more reactive organizations haven't gotten there yet. They really don't have those structures in place to sort of, at the enterprise level, really review all the risks. Now, if your organization doesn't have a risk committee and maybe is falling more on the less mature, more reactive side of the spectrum, that's okay. We just want to make sure that there's progress being made and continuous improvement so that we can have good systems and processes to identify and manage risk overall. I hope that helps.
Here are those results. Thank you, everyone, for answering this question. It's always interesting to see what everyone says. I'd like to mention that you'll find our How to Engage, Educate, and Enable Your Vendor Managers ebook in the related content widget. This ebook helps vendor risk management teams build and maintain effective and mutually beneficial relationships with their line of business vendor managers. Hillary, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but let's wrap up with some key takeaways. So the first one is really being able to identify and understand the risk culture that you're working with can help you best determine where to put your time and energy, right? What do you need to work on first? If you have difficult stakeholders, just don't take it personally. Just start digging away at those root causes. Get that collaboration, ask for feedback, understand that root cause.
Always think about your lines of business as your customers and your tools and processes as your products and service. Try and get away from that rules mentality. Be a creative problem solver and look for alternatives that can create the best outcomes while still meeting your requirements. Get rid of inefficient or manual processes wherever you can. Ensure that your vendor owners have comprehensive training and education, that they really do have that baseline understanding of why we're doing this before they attempt to go out and do it. Remember that support and advocacy run both ways. Ask yourself how you can better support and advocate for third-party or vendor owners and the business. I guarantee you this will be one of the most positive things you can do to improve your success. If you're hiring third-party risk management professionals, really think about the broad scope of skills and attributes that they need to be successful at your organization. And, you might want to prioritize which ones are going to be most important based on your risk culture. If you're a job seeker, remember when you're going out and looking at a new organization, think about their risk culture. Ask questions. How mature is that program? What resources do they have? How is it aligned? And if the management priorities are the best fit for you and your career objectives. With that, I hope that you found this information useful and insightful, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jessie for some more Q&A. Jessie?
Great. Thanks so much, Hillary. Before we dive into more questions and answers, I would like to thank everyone for attending. I would also like to thank Hillary for her time in sharing some important information. On your screen now, you will see our upcoming webinars. On September 19th through 21st, our third-party risk management bootcamp, and on October 3rd, our Differences Between Vendor Stock Reports webinar. We hope you'll be able to join us for those sessions. A link to register for those is in your copy of today's presentation slides. Let's now go ahead and answer some more questions that have come in during this session. Okay, Hillary, the next question is, when hiring third-party risk employees, should we require them to have a certification?
Certifications can certainly be helpful, but it's not always a requirement, and that's because there are only a few certifications out there, and there's nothing that can really be substituted for actual common sense and practical experience. So, you might take somebody who's worked as a line of business vendor owner, who's managed vendors for many years, really gets the process, and they might be an excellent fit, but may not have a certification. So while it's a nice to have, I don't know that it's 100% must have. I hope that helped.
Great. Our next question is, we are going to hire a new director of third-party risk management. How many years of experience should they have?
For director, I think the minimum should be 5. It's more like 7. You definitely want someone who has had enough experience sort of working with regulatory environments, knows how the framework should be applied, has been around the block a little bit with some more complicated or complex third-party risk management issues, because at the end of the day, that responsibility for that framework is going to stop with that person. So we do want a high level of competence and experience there. So probably 5 to 7 years at a minimum.
Great. Next question. I have been at my company for 5 years. We have never had an audit of third-party risk management. Is that bad?
I wouldn't say it's good. Keep in mind that audits, whether they're internal audits, self-audits, or even external regulatory exam, are all meant to help us sort of make sure we have the best practices and controls in place with our framework. And if we're never really, taking it to task, putting it to the test, we don't really know. So I would say if you've never had an audit, you may want to start with your manager and talk about getting maybe an informal review from your internal audit or, actually scheduling one. I think it's a really great practice to make sure that you're not too close to the forest to see the trees, as they say.
Great. Next question. How would you suggest we ask for a stronger tone from the top from our executives?
That can be really challenging, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It can be difficult to ask for that because it sort of implies that they're not doing what they need to. So there's a couple things you can do. One is really use data to support that request. So again, if you think back to the slide where we're talking about root causes, do you have any feedback or, real life examples that shows maybe that tone from the top could have prevented some of those behaviors or those circumstances? Use data to support, if you're in a regulated environment, there's plenty of information right there in those regulations that can help your management. You can draft a script for them and ask them if they need, help, or really show them how this could be much more beneficial. When people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, that's bad for the organization, not just for third-party risk management. So there's a couple ways to go about this, but you really have to understand your risk culture, start with your management, and use as much data as you can when making that request.
Great. Next question. We have zero chance of ever having KPIs for our vendor relationship owners. What do you suggest for making sure they are held accountable when they don't do their vendor manager work?
I'm only laughing because, yes, I realize that getting KPIs for something like this can feel impossible. Again, this is when we need to make a case for third-party risk management. We really need to use data as much as possible. So being able to show that, a person or a group of individuals is habitually late or absent with their deliverables, that kind of reporting can be helpful, but then also making sure that you can articulate what the impacts of that are to your organization. If I'm constantly late with doing something that's requested of me and it's preventing my organization from onboarding that vendor or getting a contract signed, we're delaying that benefit to the organization. So always kind of think about in terms of like what the ultimate impact is versus they just didn't do what they're supposed to do, because the impact will speak more loudly and more clearly to those folks that you need to help you enforce those requirements. So I hope that's helpful.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Can you outsource an entire third-party risk management program?
I guess in theory you could. I would never recommend that for a couple of reasons. One is because to really effectively manage risk, you have to be sort of vested in that environment. You have to know what's going on. You have to understand the internal risk culture, know who the players are. So where it's completely possible and in a lot of cases advisable to think about outsourcing, functions or tasks that are maybe you're not staffed for, so maybe like due diligence document collection, or maybe you need some additional subject matter expert support to get those risk reviews done. I would never suggest a complete 100% outsourcing. I'd always at least leave, one or two people internally to make sure that what's happening inside is connecting with what's happening outside and then it's meeting the requirement.
Great. Thanks, Hillary. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have left for questions today. Thank you, Hillary, for taking the time to address some of those that came in. Any questions we did not have time to answer today, we will address offline. We would like to thank you all for attending and hope you found today's session valuable. A big thank you to Hillary for her time and great content. You can ask even more questions inside of our third-party think tank, an online community that is dedicated to third-party risk professionals and free to join. Just because today's session has ended doesn't mean the conversations and questions must. Post your questions at thirdpartythinktank.com and see what your peers have to say. In the community, you'll find thousands of free educational resources related to third-party risk management topics to assist you. If you would like to become a member of Third Party Think Tank, you can register on the site or shoot us an email and we'll get you registered and send you a link to set your password. We did record today's session, and that recording link will be provided to you in a follow-up email that you will receive tomorrow afternoon. Also in that follow-up email will be the survey link for you to request the CPE credit. On behalf of VinMinder, it has been a pleasure. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.